This is the Fantasy Sanctuary, and we are back for one last rookie mock draft before the NFL draft next week. With me are three of the smartest folks in the fantasy community to give us a lowdown on where they're going to be drafting players in a couple of weeks' time. First up, we've got Mags, creator and host of the Dynasty Hotseat, one of our favourite YouTube channels. And of course, he's also the co-host of the Wildcard Rewind. Mags, are you sick of the pre-draft talk yet, or are you just enjoying those last few days of ambiguity before we know where the rookies are landing?
No, I love it. I'm all for it. I like the different phases that you have. You have like your pre-combine phase, then your kind of midlands that we're in at the minute, and then you got the post-draft phase. So I like all of it. So I've got plenty of time for rookie mocks and all this stuff.
Good stuff. Okay, so next up we've got Derek Brown of FantasyPros. You may know him by his Twitter name of @dbro_FFB. Constantly churning out loads of great content for FantasyPros. He's all over Twitter with loads of great nuggets. Derek, do you enjoy the build-up to the draft more than the fallout?
Yeah, I mean, look, I love all parts of the process. I love the fact that with Dynasty and all these things, we're 365, 24/7, dude. So for me, I'm just ready to embrace the chaos. I'm ready for it to be here.
100%. Lastly, by no means least, Mr. Ireland himself, my co-host of the Fantasy Sanctuary and DLF writer, Rich Cooling. He's been grinding out positional preview videos for us over the last 2 weeks. You should be checking them out on our channel. Rich, after talking to so many of the great guests we had on, who did you change your mind on the most, if anyone?
Yeah, it was quite a big change for me, to be honest. I've had basically the same process for the last 3 years in terms of how I grade and my rookie models and stuff. But speaking with Dave Wright, FF_Space Manager, know him, I've actually tweaked my rookie model for the first time in 3 years. So now my running back model now incorporates weight. Let's just say him banging on small running backs are pointless finally swayed my opinion. So yeah, Jamhyr Gibbs, Devon Achane, Deuce Vaughn all took a bit of a hit in the rookie model.
So that's it. Running backs are just going to plummet in this draft then. We'll get straight into it. Superflex, Titan Premium. Going to throw in a load of strategy questions as we go along. We'll get through 2 rounds, try and keep things rattling along. Mags, you're going to be first up with the 101. I know you've had loads of conversations about this, whether it's been on Twitter or on your own channel, about what will it take for it not to be Bijan. So hit me with it.
Right. So several things need to happen, right? And stay with me here, right? 1, there needs to be some sort of general hospital worker strike in Missouri and the Kansas City area. That needs to be the first thing that happens. The second thing that needs to happen is Austin Eckler needs to get traded to the Patriots. The third thing that needs to happen is Bijan Robinson, after he's selected in the first round, needs to fall and break his leg. And as we know, there are no medical staff available because of the general strike that we just talked about. The fourth thing that needs to happen is Jamhyr Gibbs needs to also be drafted to the Chargers, freeing up that Austin Eckler slot. And that's the only way I can think of Bijan Robinson not going as 1-1. If he breaks his leg, goes to the Patriots, has to compete with Austin Eckler, and Jamhyr Gibbs takes Austin Eckler's slot. That's the only way.
So I'm going to plug in Bijan Robinson for you here then.
Yeah, let's do that.
I think a lot of people seem to be struggling to move that pick on at the minute. Like I've seen loads of questions in Discords over the last couple of weeks where people are saying, I'm sending out offers for 101, hoping like to move it on because I don't want to take a running back because I need quarterbacks. And people just don't seem to be able to do it. And I think you've really just got to sit on the pick now and see where Bijan lands. And that's probably going to get a lot easier at that point. Derek, Bryce Young over the last couple of weeks, he's become the heavy favorite for the 101 in the actual draft. I know you're high on CJ Stroud in your rookie rankings. Is it one of those two, or would you go with a different player here?
This is CJ Stroud. Easy for me. I don't care that Bryce is going to go 1 over him. We know CJ Stroud is going to get first-round capital, probably top 5 capital. Now you're seeing all these different things kind of just thrown out there, whether it's he's difficult to coach, blah, blah, blah. I think a lot of this is smoke and mirrors. He's easily the QB1 for me. I'm not even going to second guess it, man.
Good stuff. If he did fall out of the top 10, would that be the kind of thing where you'd have to look back at your rankings, or are you just kind of completely comfortable in that? Yeah.
Nope. I mean, if he falls outside of the top 10, what are we talking about for scenarios? He possibly goes to even a better team. Like, how good do we feel about CJ Stroud going to the Texans, the Colts, name another team, the freaking Raiders, somebody like that, versus him going to the Seahawks, the Lions, the Vikings? Hell no. If he falls, I might be even higher.
I think the only one that would give me some real pause is maybe the Titans. I think you could really start seeing that it could get a little messy maybe. But in general, yeah.
They seem to have goo eyes for Will Levis, though. So hopefully that doesn't mess us up here.
Okay, Rich, we kept you quiet and kept you waiting. I've got a feeling that I know where you're going with 103 here. And it's something that kind of listening to Pat Corain's podcast this week, he was talking about, we're not NFL GMs, we're fantasy football GMs. With that in mind, is it Anthony Richardson for you here?
No, it's going to be Bryce Young. I think, to me, there's look, everybody keeps talking about the height. I'm not concerned. We talked about it on the rookie preview. The biggest knock on short quarterbacks is completed passes in that short to intermediate middle of the field. Bryce Young has been elite throughout his college career in that area. I've got very few concerns, and I think he's going to be an incredible NFL quarterback, and I think he's going to be a fantastic fantasy quarterback.
Do you think the Panthers have kind of done enough to surround him that he can succeed and hit the ground running in year one?
No, I think they still need some work to do. I think they need to add to that receiving room, but I don't think that offense is finished yet. I think they're gonna continue to add through both the offseason but also the draft.
Okay, before we get back to Mags for his next pick, over 50% of you watching aren't subscribed, but the good news is you found us, you're here. Let us continue to help you. Hit that subscribe button, leave us a like. Let's get on with the next picks. Mags, you've done a bunch of these. Is this playing out how you'd expect it to so far?
Yeah, this is fairly similar. I think pretty much the top maybe 8 or so are going to be pretty similar to what you normally see here. Coming in at 4, I mean, it's kind of made it a little bit easy for me. It is Superflex. You're already hovering over him. It has to be Anthony Richardson, a guy that, definitely out of these guys has got the highest ceiling. This guy could end up not only being like the best rookie in this class, this guy could be a number 1 overall player in Dynasty Fantasy Football if he hits the high ceiling that he has. The problem is he could also be a tight end in 3 years. You just don't know what's going to happen with this guy.
That's hyperbolic. Come on. No.
Okay, so give me an ideal landing spot for Anthony Richardson, because he seems to be going in all kinds of different spots. We're seeing, he's had a bunch of visits. He was visiting the Ravens today, who very likely are just doing due diligence rather than really thinking about making a move up. But where would you love to see him land?
A couple of places do stand out. I heard some people talking about maybe he could end up at the Seahawks and sitting for a year, behind Geno Smith. I actually really like the Colts offense because obviously they've got the new head coach coming over from the Eagles. They've run a lot of plays using Jalen Hurts. I think Anthony Richardson shares some of the athletic ability that Jalen Hurts has, so maybe he would be a nice fit in there with that offense they're going to try and run over in Indianapolis. So that would be quite a nice fit.
Okay, so Derek, back to you with a 105. I mean, the way this is playing out, do you think you just smashed the button on Jaxon Smith-Njigba, or is he one of these kind of running backs who perhaps is slightly undersized who you'd like here? I know Sean Siegel was talking on his podcast last week about how he's got Jamhyr Gibbs up there above some of these quarterbacks who've gone, and there's one thing Sean knows, it's fantasy football, but it's definitely a contrarian view.
I mean, it's a contrarian view, and no shade to Sean, but there's no way in hell I could go Jamhyr Gibbs here. I can't do that, man. Regardless of however you want to break this down, for sure, pass catching upside, that's great, that's grand, and I'm not shading that. But if we're just going to sweep it under the rug that he's sub 200 pounds, then you're not looking at the entire part and picture of what that means for the NFL. When we're having to go back to comps of 10 years ago, 8, 9, 15 years ago and say, hey, it could be Jamal Charles and Chris Johnson and CJ Spiller. And it's when was the last time you saw an undersized back get that type of workload? Oh, wait, it was way back then, not in recent NFL. So projecting that forward is really tough for Jamhyr Gibbs. So he's not even in the conversation for me. I'd like to push back before I make my pick here. I'm not filibustering here, guys, but I keep hearing when we roll through mocks and not only on this show, but it's out there in the space everywhere. Okay, we talk about Anthony Richardson's ceiling, but then people are like, okay, well, the floor is kind of low. To me, Anthony Richardson has a higher ceiling and a higher floor than Bryce Young, to me, easily. And that's just based off of his rushing. We've seen this over how many different years? Lamar, Jalen Hurts, We've had the same kind of conversation with Trey Lance, other mobile quarterbacks. Like
Daniel Jones
floor
last
is
season.
top 12. His floor is top 12 if you project him to play the entire season with how much he is going to run. Like his floor is literally a QB1 if he gets you 700 yards on the ground and he throws for 3K. Like he will be a top 12 quarterback. That's what we're hoping Bryce Young could get into. Like
I love it. He's the only quarterback that if all four went in the top 10 and had great landing spots, he's the only quarterback that you're starting week 1 in your fantasy lineup because he's got
Bryce?
that floor because of the rushing production.
Which one are you talking about? Richardson?
Richardson.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about it is like we all talk about it and it's mentioned constantly. If we knew Richardson was already starting and he was going to start the entire season, so put him on the freaking Colts. We knew that already, like this is not even a conversation. Like I've moved up Richardson and Stroud into their own tiers, basically, because I just look at like his floor and ceiling combination is even higher than Bryce Young because I don't think Bryce Young's going to run for a ton. So you're projecting what? Like to get him up into the Anthony Richardson tier, but for both ceiling and floor, he's got to be what, a yearly 30, 35 touchdown pass guy, period. It's got to be somewhere around there. Unless you're projecting him to run for 500 yards.
I think one of the key things that kind of gets overlooked as well with Anthony Richardson, his ability to avoid sacks is so good that it's going to help keep him on the field. Because if you're standing back there and you're not making the decisions that you need to, and you're not getting rid of the ball when you need to, and you're taking sacks, then it's so much harder for the offense around you. You put in negative situations where it's harder for the coach to go, okay, well, let's just run the ball for a couple of plays because you're starting on.
It's not what they did with Justin
15.
Chicago inserted QB run into their offense. Fields is not throwing for a ton of yards and stuff like that. And we're sitting here like, well, shit, he's a top 5 quarterback every week. Even if we nerfed that type of production we got out of Fields a little bit, we're talking about what, locked in top 10, top 12? Like, and this is saying like he throws like absolute dog shit. Like that's where I put his floor and ceiling over them. But anyway, I've talked about my non-pick long enough. For me, it's Jaxon Smith-Njigba. It's easy, and I would take him as high as 104. Like I would take him over Bryce Young, and even in Superflex, because I think that JSN, the way that I have this class tiered out, it's Bijan, it's CJ, it's A-Rich, and it's JSN as my foursome like elite tier in this class because everybody talks about it like. This class doesn't really have an elite wide receiver. Yes, you do. He's staring you right in the face. JSN is freaking elite. He had one of the best singular seasons we've seen in the last 10 to 15 years, no matter what freaking metric you look at. And people want to knock him because, okay, maybe he's slot only. 1, I think that's bullshit. 2, Cooper Kupp showed that shit doesn't matter at all. So I don't care if he's slot only. Like JSN pops in almost every freaking metric that you look at. He went out and he tested because then all of the boo birds were like, oh, he's got to be slow. Okay, well, he's not slow, and his short area is elite. I have a hard time projecting where JSN goes to a situation and he doesn't earn a 20% target share out the damn gate. I mean, like, unless we're talking like, hell, if he goes to Houston or somewhere that's even worse, 25%. You're looking at like he could get upwards of like type of Drake London rookie year volume, and that's fantastic. So I would take JSN as high as 104. At the 105 spot, lock, set it, forget it, baby. Gone.
I think the only argument against JSN is if you play in standard leagues where there is no bonuses whatsoever for catching the ball, then perhaps you can argue, but he's still, to me, the wide receiver 1, and those leagues are kind of garbage anyway. Rich, moving on to you. This is a range where we do see a bunch of wide receivers going off. I know you're kind of high on one guy in particular behind Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Is that where you're going here?
Yeah, I'm smashing Jordan Addison here. Elite prospect in terms of, we're talking 98th percentile in my model. Ticks every analytical box. This is a guy that commanded 24% targets per route run as a rookie. Was asked to play a really challenging role in a USC offense in terms of, you look at the amount he was lined up as a true X receiver, having to face press coverage. It was larger than the majority of other players in this class. And I've got very few concerns about him transitioning to the NFL. And I think that, if I can get him as a mid-first round pick, I'm very happy all day.
Lovely stuff. Mags, 107. How do you feel about the kind of last couple of picks going before you? Do you feel like you've been snagged on them? Are you quite happy with what you're seeing on the board?
No, I wanted those two guys. I got to be honest. Like, those are the two guys that I was looking at as well. But I think, at this age, I'm looking at Jamhyr Gibbs, and I'm thinking at 107 that's pretty good value. Now, after the draft, that could change depending on where he ends up. But obviously, our concerns. I think Derek, you're right. Comparing him to somebody like a Jamal Charles, like that's a lot of pressure coming out of the gate. And you're right. We don't really see
even the comparison for Alvin Kamara has been dog shit. Alvin Kamara weighs 16 more freaking pounds than Jamhyr Gibbs. Like, they're not even in the same ballpark of projection. That's the one thing on Twitter that I've hated this entire process. It's like, Jamhyr Gibbs is Alvin Kamara. What? Because he's got dreads and he catches passes? What kind of shit are we going with here? Like, seriously, we could do better than this as a community.
Yeah, I kind of feel like if Jamhyr Gibbs was bald, then people would say he was Austin Eckler, right?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. That's exactly my point. You'd be like, oh, he's this guy. Like, whatever.
Yeah, but I still think there's certainly a huge kind of potential there if he does come out. But we've seen this in the past with teams that, Jamhyr Gibbs can catch passes, but that doesn't seem to mean a lot of the time for these NFL teams. You never know what's going to happen. I mean, we talked about, I think, Rich, whenever you were on my show, we talked about how, Rex Burkhead had more receptions than James Cook last year. What was that? James Cook.
DeAndre Swift also says hello.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm taking Gibbs here, but, as this kind of process has developed, I'm kind of cooling a little bit on Gibbs, I've got to be honest.
Okay, so Derek, 108. This was kind of a point in the draft where people were looking at Will Levis a month ago, and now we're kind of seeing in mock drafts and hearing whispers from the NFL that he's sliding further, and people might even be looking at taking Hendon Hooker ahead of him. We saw Peter Schrager's mock draft yesterday. He had the Titans taking Hooker at 11. Do you think there's a scenario where Hooker becomes this kind of risky pick where teams might end up going for him at this sort of 108 to 110 range in drafts?
Hooker is not going to go first round of the NFL draft. I'm sorry. Like, Schrager needs to share whatever the hell he was smoking when he wrote that up, but he's not going to go round one. It's total bullshit. I don't see Hooker going round one. I don't see it happening. I think it's a lot of smoke for people saying, okay, well, you and you and you and you are quarterback needy. So which one of you fools is going to trade up for our pick? Come on, let's go. We'll trade back. We'll sit here and take you for half of what you're worth. No takers. Damn it. 26-year-old quarterback. No takers. No takers. Is that on your bingo card? No. Okay. Sorry, I couldn't get any takers. But with Hooker, I just don't see it, man. So no, I mean, for right now, I have him kind of projected with second round capital. I think that for me, you could talk yourself into Hendon Hooker. I'm looking at my ranks right now as high as like the 112, but I'm not taking him over Levis. Depending on if Dalton Kincaid gets first round capital, I'm probably not taking him over Dalton Kincaid. I'll look at him as being an elite tier tight end prospect. It could shift a little bit. Like right now, the way that I'm projecting this, and we'll get into this player later, but I think QJ could easily fall into the second round of the NFL draft. Everything is screaming that right now. We can discuss that a little bit more later, but I'm not going to go Levis. I'm sure as hell not going to go Hooker. My biggest conversation with this pick right now is there's two guys that stand out to me. And sort of this, like with this conversation, I'm projecting draft capital, but like, if we knew today, like this pick is between Zay Flowers and Zach Charbonnet for me. Like Zay is locked into first round draft capital. He has been invited to the draft. He's been rumored as high as top 15 to the Patriots. There are a lot of teams that love Zay Flowers. The Kansas City Chiefs just brought him in for a late workout. Like I don't see him leaving the first round. But this is interesting versus Charbonnet, where it's like, does he get second round capital? Does he go in the third? Does he go to a place like Cincinnati? They cut Mixon and everybody's like, oh, dear Lord, bring me all the Zach Charbonnet. I don't know. So right now, I'm going to lean on draft capital in my ranks. I think it's a really tough conversation, but I'm going to go with Zay Flowers. He's the wide receiver 2 for me in this class. I absolutely freaking love him. Most of his metrics were held down by absolutely atrocious freaking dog water quarterback play. And this is where the analytic versus the film side of me wants to pull out the knife and wants to sit here and fight right now, because if you look at a lot of the things that I care about for Zay Flowers, like yards per route run, PFF receiving grades, he doesn't pop in some of those metrics. But if you look at other parts about like his profile, like he hits the bare minimum of kind of like in the 20s of breakout age. But his other things are great. His college dominator is great. His collegiate target shares were great. So the other parts of his profile, which is like basically him earning volume that he could control outside of he can't throw the damn ball to himself, Zay Flowers pops as a prospect for those parts of his analytical profile. In the film, shit, he's an X. He can play outside. I have no qualms about that. I think he's a freaking stud. So yes, Zay Flowers.
Rich, it sounded like you might have been hoping Zay Flowers fell one more pick to you there.
Yeah, I really thought Derek was going to talk himself into taking Charbonnet. So, yeah.
I mean, you can talk me into some Charbonnet. I just need some second-round definite capital, baby.
But yeah, I love Zay Flowers. I think he's for me, the one receiver in this class that I think could come in and play X, could play flanker, could play in the slot.
Damn right.
Like, he is a true movable piece in offense, and I think that there's not many of those in this draft class, quite frankly. I think, as you said, you see it on film. He can compete at all three levels. He's a great route runner. I think analytically he ticks a lot of boxes. So yeah, I'm a big Zay Flowers fan. For me, this is a challenge here because there's a big drop off, and I'm staring at it thinking, do I just take the fourth QB who, yeah, I don't like as a prospect, but if he gets top 10 draft capital, getting a QB in a Superflex league at this point that's going to start for a year or two feels amazing value? Or do I go with kind of the tier down of wide receiver and go with a guy that I think is really safe, has got a high floor but not a particularly sexy ceiling in Josh Downs? But yeah, I think I'm going to go QB. I'll go Will Levis. I don't like the pick. I don't like the player, but at this point, QB value is king.
Is this the part where everybody wants to do you start shopping this pick like when somebody's on the clock for 104 and you just say, I don't want no part of Will Levis. Give me the 24 action, baby. Please, somebody give me any 24 first and a 24 second. Come get this. You can have the QB of your dreams, please. I would be trying to shop this damn thing all day if I was staring at Will Levis. And I don't hate this thing. I'm just saying.
Anything after 108, I'm happy selling for a 24 first straight up. If I can get something on top, great. But yeah, 109 and beyond, give me a 24 first straight up.
I think my cutoff line is 108, 109 right now because I think QJ is going to fall into the second round. I think my cutoff right now is Charbonnet and Gibbs, where Gibbs goes, but my top 8's pretty solid. So yeah, I'm with getting the hell out of this. You ain't got to go home, but you got to get the hell up out of this draft at 109.
And I think it's kind of pretty realistic to talk about because there'll be plenty of teams who, might have scraped into the playoffs last year with Tom Brady as their third quarterback and now are facing down that point. And, the quarterback position changes so much. Mags, you're up at 110 here. With this being tight end premium, do you start thinking about any of the tight ends? I mean, we're seeing them mocked inside the top 15, right around that range a lot. Do you think
Tom, real quick, how premium is this premium? Are we talking
just go
1,
0.5,
1 and a quarter, 1.5,
1.5? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm torn between two people essentially. It is do I go for Zach Charbonnet? That is kind of the guy that is perfectly acceptable here to take at 110, or do I really shoot for the moon and actually with tight end premium, do I just go Dalton Kincaid here? Who's a guy that is, Michael Mayer might be the best tight end NFL player in this draft, but I don't think he's the best fantasy football tight end in this class. I think Dalton Kincaid has much, much more potential to finish, outside of that tight end mush that, you got your Hayden Hurst and other guys in there. I feel like Michael Mayer slots right into that kind of minefield where, yeah, 1 year he might finish as tight end 5, but if he got 5 less points, he'd be tight end 18. I feel like he's got a slot in there, whereas Dalton Kincaid has more of a chance to break the mold and, reach up to where someone like maybe a Dallas Goedert has got to, kind of separating himself from the pack.
So,
but I'm like, I should probably take Charbonnet. I'm torn.
So, if you were going to take Dalton Kincaid here, where would you want to see him land in the draft to kind of be like, okay, I can commit to that with a first round pick?
Yeah, you want some, someone with, we always talk about like rookie quarterbacks and or younger quarterbacks. A tight end is like their best friend. So, somewhere maybe that has like a younger quarterback would be quite good. I mean, people have mocked him to the Chiefs as being the heir to Travis Kelce. I mean, that would be pretty cool, right? But then you're waiting a while for him to become fantasy relevant. But then you got the huge payday a couple of years down the line. I'm not actually too worried where Dalton Kincaid ends up. I mean, whoever drafts him, they know they're not drafting this massive blocking tight end. They're essentially drafting a guy that is going to be, in the slot in a pass catching role rather than a blocking role. So I'm not totally worried about where he's going to be. I've talked myself. I'm going to take the goddamn Dalton Kincaid.
Okay, so we're back to you, Derek, and Zach Charbonnet's on the board. Is this just dead
Charbonnet.
Easy for you?
Charbonnet. It's that easy. Charbonnet. I would have taken Charbonnet with the last pick. I'll take Charbonnet over QJ. I don't hate the shot on the upside for Dalton Kincaid. The only problem that I have with taking the shot on the upside with Kincaid is, damn it, I love some of the other tight ends in this class. And it's like, why do I pay up for Dalton Kincaid when I can take Sammy Laporte, when I can take Tucker Kraft later? Like, both of those guys, I think, are in a very similar tier. They're not exactly same kind of prospect, but I could see their ceiling being Sam Laporta's ceiling is damn near just as high as Dalton Kincaid's. So that's even if I was divided on premium format, I think I would easily lean Charbonnet. Like he's at 8th in my overall rankings, and I have Kincaid at 12th.
Yeah, so it's not too dissimilar. Rich, moving on to you for the last pick of round one. I know you've just kind of finalized your pre-draft rankings. How's this played out against them? Are you still feeling like there's value on the board for you?
Yeah, I mean, he's pretty much chalk as I've sort of got it ranked. The one guy that Dalton Kincaid I've got a bit lower. I probably wouldn't feel comfortable spending a first round pick on any of these tight ends, just because, as Derek said, there's 3 or 4 guys in that second, third round that I really, really like. And I think that, the fact that Darnell Washington and Luke Musgrave are still in tight end 3 and 4 in ADP right now, I think is ridiculous. And I think, give me Sam Laporta, give me Zach Kuntz, and give me Tucker Kraft over those guys. So, I really like some of the value at tight end. But the guy that I'm going to go here, it's not sexy. I think he is a slot only at the next level. But Josh Downs, I really like him. I think he is a plug and play slot receiver that's going to be a perfect 1B on an offense. You think of Tyler Boyd at the beginning of his career had, I want to say, 3 top 36 seasons on the bounce. I think that's what Josh Downs is going to be. He's never going to be a wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, but a solid week in, week out flex play that you can rely on to get 5-6 catches a week. I'm really happy there, and I think that the back end of the first round, sometimes you just got to take that solid double rather than swinging for the home run.
Nice. Okay, so we'll move on to the second round, but please hit that like and subscribe button. We've got a goal of 1,000 subscribers before training camp opens. We're going to smash that with your help. 201 mags, I've set this up as a snake draft rather than linear, but we'll just forget about that and it'll all be okay. If you have this pick as your own, not one that you got by trade, there's a good chance that your roster finished in a really bad way last year. Yeah. Is there any kind of mindset you have for using those kind of 201 picks that you'd be approaching this with?
Yeah, well, especially if this is Superflex, right? So if my roster is, in a bad way, I'm probably, definitely thinking about Hendon Hooker here to improve my quarterback room. But then, if I've traded for it, then maybe my quarterback room's okay, and I'm looking for some running backs to plug in for next year. So, it's a really interesting point. I think while mock drafts are great to look at and to see where the consensus landing spots are, you still, you have holes to fill in your team. And I know people will always say, you need to draft, don't draft to plug holes in your team. But when it's quarterback, it's kind of hard to go and trade for quarterback. So the draft with quarterbacks is maybe the one exception I would make to, if you got a hole there, you need to plug it in. So if we're going to run with that scenario, 2-1 is probably here where I would be taking Hendon Hooker. So we'll run with that and we'll slot him in at 2-1.
Lovely stuff. Okay, so Derek, over to you.
All right. I am gonna go, but I'm gonna go base with probably lean with draft capital here. I was debating Hooker just because I have him sitting in this same kind of range. Like I think you can make a case for him as high as like 13th. So perfect pick there. I'm gonna go with draft capital. I'm just gonna take Michael Mayer. It's not an overwhelmingly sexy pick, but I think that there is a tier drop off of the wide receivers after you're looking at downs. Because honestly, right now, until we have actual draft capital tied to this, once you get past the top 3 running backs, once you get past like the top 5 wide receivers, we really don't have a clue where any of those guys are going to go. They could go in the 2nd round, they could go in the 4th round. It really depends on what teams think about them, and we've heard everything across the board. So while it's not sexy, I'll just take my 806 touchdowns per year out of Michael Mayer and see you guys in a few picks.
Yeah, it makes plenty of sense. It just touching back on Hendon Hooker, and feel free to jump in here. But do we feel like the kind of rushing production that he had in college is something that can be translated to the NFL? Because, I mean, I don't watch a huge amount of college until this kind of year, and then it's obviously he's coming off an ACL, so year one's definitely going to be tempered expectations. But
that's one of the reasons why, again, like I'm not as high. And I know nobody is really high on Will Levis, but like him and Hendon Hooker, like I have big questions about how much of their rushing is going to translate to the NFL. Hendon Hooker is not that much of an explosive athlete. Like, can he run? Yes. Is that going to be his bread and butter? And you're going to be locking in, like, really rushing guys have to get over the 500-yard mark for you to like really move the needle, unless they're going to be like a 300, 400-yard kind of guy every year. I mean, you're going to need a little more passing out of them to really pay off what you want out of fantasy for that. And I just don't know if that's going to be Hendon Hooker. Like, I could see him maybe get to 400. I don't know if he's going to be athletic enough, especially coming off the ACL. If he is going to get to the point where he's a difference maker in fantasy. And Will Levis, he's not an explosive runner. He's a straight line guy. He takes a lot of freaking hits. Why he's been banged up a shit ton in college. I don't see his rushing translating that much. So it's kind of tough for me to really get excited for those guys.
Cool. Rich, moving on to your pick with the 203. What have you got for us here?
So I think there's a big tier gap here. And at that point, I'm basically looking at it going, right, now I think all the players that I'm confident in have gone. So I'm just going for the guy that's got the biggest upside. Let's take an absolutely monster swing. And it's Devon Achane. I think that
I thought that was a build-up for QJ.
No, I was hovering. That was what I was leading.
I thought it was a build-up for QJ. As soon as you said shooting for upside, and then you were like, oh, I wasn't expecting that.
I wanted to tease you in. No, analytically ticks a lot of boxes. Yes, he is 4th percentile weight, but you're talking 86th percentile breakout age, 80th percentile yards per team rush attempt, 75th percentile best receiver market share. This is a guy that has done it at the highest level in college, produced, crazy athletic. I'm really excited to see him on the field. If he gets round 2 draft capital, he is going to creep up these fancy boards, and I'm really excited to have a swing at a guy that I think, look, his floor is back up, never fantasy relevant, but his ceiling is potential superstar, and let's take a swing.
I have a question, sir. Now,
yes.
if Devon Achane went in the 3rd round, would you still take him this high? Because I think it's a definite possibility he goes round 3 instead of round 2.
Does
that change the flavor of the Kool-Aid any?
Yeah, probably. I'd probably go one of the 2 wide receivers that I think have got similar upside. But yeah, I think that there's a tier here of like risk reward in QJ, Achane, and Jalin Hyatt. And yeah, I'm leaning running back, but it could easily be if he falls and does drift into that back end of day 2, even into day 3, then I'm probably not taking him until late 2nd, early 3rd in a dynasty draft.
204 Mags, has that thrown you? Rich thrown a spanner in the works and kind of thrown you off your mojo?
Yeah, I was thinking he was going to take Quentin Johnston, and I was going to swoop in and get Achane and tell everyone my favorite fact that his personal best in the 200 meters would have finished 5th in the Olympics last time it was on, which is unbelievable. Like, he's that fast. So, yeah, now I'm kind of torn between a guy I want to take and, the guy that, people watching this are probably screaming saying, you need to take Quentin Johnston, right? Like, how has Quentin Johnston fallen this far? My problem with Quentin Johnston is I'm not sure, how he wins in the NFL. I mean, he's like a guy built like the Hulk, but he plays like Bruce Banner. Like, he's not using the physicality that he is naturally gifted with. He's got a really horrendously low contested catch win rate. I don't know, it's something in the 30%, I think. This guy should be really good. He's got all the gifts for it, but something's holding him back. And I'm not sure if, maybe you could say that was Max Duggan, maybe it was quarterback play, but a lot of time he dropped the ball as well when it was like right in his hand. It was right there.
More drops than touchdowns last year.
Pardon?
More drops than touchdowns last year.
Yeah, exactly. So I probably should take Quentin Johnston here, but I'm not going to, because I'm going to take a guy that excites me a lot more, and that's Tyjae Spears. I love watching Tyjae Spears play. I think that he actually has the potential. I know he doesn't do it a lot, but his hands, I think, can be worked on. I can see him improving his pass catching and getting, some extra work in the passing game. There are, especially if you type in, Tyjae Spears highlights on YouTube, you're going to see him making catches. He's not a natural pass catcher, but I just think that he's so electric with the ball in his hands that people are going to really work with him on improving that skill. And if he can improve that, then he's got a super high ceiling. And of course, he's already very good in between the tackles as well, and so sharp and electric. So I'm going to shoot for the upside with the running back here and take Tyjae Spears, even though I probably shouldn't.
Derek, are you going to stop the Quentin Johnston slide?
Yes, I'm stopping the slide. I would have taken him like 2 picks ago. Yeah, it's QJ for me. And I'm not even the big... Y'all are going to make me sound like the damn QJ stan here. I'm not even the biggest QJ stan. I'm really not. But, I mean, he's still going to go top 2 rounds of the NFL draft. I don't think that he goes first round anymore. And I've talked about this a few different times, but Quentin Johnston was not even invited to the NFL draft. So, like, there was like a story floating out there about basically like he picked out a suit, really wanted to go, like it was his lifelong dream, and the NFL draft said nope. They didn't even extend him an invite. So he's probably going to slip out of the first round. And this kind of goes with the entire flow of everything that we've been kind of hearing around QJ. It's like, yeah, he's got great straight line speed. He's explosive. There are questions in his profile, and his short area agility is like sub 15th percentile. So not great. But at this point, yeah, I'll take the swing on QJ. He's going to go, even if he goes the top of the second round, like the landing spots you're looking at in that range, you're looking at the Houston Texans, Arizona Cardinals, no DeAndre Hopkins. He'll eventually be moving on. The Colts, the Los Angeles Rams are at 36th. Who's going to sit here and contest him for targets outside of like washed up ass Tyler Higbee? Van Jefferson's never been anything. He could be the second weapon right behind Cooper Kupp. So at this point, yeah, the risk is absolutely justified with Quentin Johnston, because for all of the problems with his profile, the other things are absolutely true, is that he's a straight line, explosive as hell athlete. He was 11th in missed tackles forced last year and 6th in yak per reception. So, like, you get him a team that's not going to ask him to be an outside X, not going to ask him to be an outside Z from the hilt. He's able to use him on slants and crossers and just let the guy eat up turf. Like, if that's the case, he could have a fine rookie season if a team says, okay, these are the things that you do extremely damn well. We're going to maximize that, similar to what Seattle did with DK. They ran him on a bunch of go routes and said, go up, be a bully, and win. If a team says to Quentin Johnston, we understand you have warts to your game, which anybody that has ever turned on the damn tape for QJ knows that, yes, there are warts to his game. If they say, look, we're going to put the ball in your hands in space and ask you to just go out there and be a damn athlete, he could walk away and people could be looking after this year and be like, jeez, man, I wish I'd have taken this shot on him, much like people do with DK.
100%. DK Metcalf was the one comparison as you were talking there that just sprang up. It makes a lot of sense.
My new comparison, and this is honestly the best damn comp that I've heard for Quentin Johnston, because it matches from a size, a lot of the skill set standpoint, but Brandon Ayuk. That is honestly the closest freaking comp that I've heard. That is just straight up fantastic. Like that is where QJ is, and that's a lot of the same questions Ayuk had coming out as a player.
I love that. That's fine. I've not heard that. That's awesome. I think the only difference, Ayuk had that weird, freaky arm length catch radius, but outside of that, that's spot on. That's I like that.
Okay, so Rich, 206. What have you got for us here?
So this, I feel like I'm drafting guys that I don't want to draft in this draft, and I hate
Well,
it.
don't draft them. Nobody's making you.
Yeah, look,
you're like, I don't want to take this guy. Well, then don't do it. Like,
Yeah, you got to take value at some point, and I think, look, Jalin Hyatt's the pick. I'm not convinced that you can view any of his film and translate anything to the NFL, but
dear Lord, why?
Speed slot.
Hyatt? Why Hyatt?
I think speed slot. I think there's a chance that it can translate. You know, if you can give me a Christian Kirk in Arizona in his final year type season where he's getting the free release out of the slot, he's not being asked to, compete with press coverage. I think there's definitely a scenario in which he's a reliable, dare I say it, deep threat that's going to give you good season-long numbers. He's never going to be a guy that I'm comfortable plugging in the lineup week in, week out. But I think, we've seen it. Deshaun Jackson, Will Fuller, like you hold your nose and, they're rubbish one week and they're good next week. As a flex play, they're good. And I think for me, there's a teardrop after him, and I've got to take a punt that there's the boom bust potential before we get on to the next guys.
Yeah, I was watching a mock draft from Hayden Winks this week, and he's very high on him, and he made a lot of similar points to you. So, it might not be Derek's cup of tea, but you're definitely not alone on it, Rich.
No.
I think there'll be.
Somebody makes me take Hyatt. Somebody shit my cornflakes, man. No, I can't.
When you get those kind of wide varieties of opinions in drafts, it's often where you can end up scooping value. So it'd be interesting to see where he does go in leagues in a few weeks' time.
I look at Hyatt as a falling knife, dude. Like, he is buried in my ranks. Like, I've got Hyatt as like my 36th overall player.
Wow.
Ooh.
I will not. Everybody, like, I have buried his ass to the point where, like, if you're following my ranks, you're not going to end up. The amount of Jalin Hyatt you're going to end up with your rookie drafts is big old damn goose egg.
What draft capital are you expecting to have him there?
Second round. I just think that his prospect profile is absolutely bad. Like it is not good at all. Hyatt basically could never earn a target share or a consistent, like he's almost got a 21 flat breakout age. I mean, he scrapes by like right below that to where it's like, oh, it's kind of viable. But then you look at the rest of his stuff and it's like, okay, yeah, like a lot of his other things, if you look at the singular season, you're like, okay, maybe. But then you're looking at it like contextually and it's like, okay, this is a guy that everybody's like, okay, wow, he's so good. But he couldn't earn targets from the hop against Josh Palmer and Velus Jones his first year, who we know are bad prospects. They've been nothing in the NFL, probably will remain nothing in the NFL. Second year, Cedric Tillman outproduced him like by spades. And Cedric Tillman's not a fantastic prospect either. Like his yearly efficiency is not great. And so comparing those 2 years against Jalin Hyatt, and then Jalin Hyatt wasn't doing a whole hell of a lot until Cedric Tillman got hurt. Not even like going into his profile and saying, okay, he is a slot wide receiver who never, ever was asked to win versus man or press. He is going to be probably airdropped into a situation and asked to win as an outside guy or a Z guy. He's never had to do that at Tennessee. You also talk about like I brought up all the holes in his prospect profile. Like, even if you look at like all of his deeper metrics, like, yeah, like he had a good year. Was it a year that explains away like could not earn a healthy target share early in his career and still was non-existent and still finished outside the top 45 wide receivers this year in PFF receiving grade in his best season. I think Hyatt is a dynasty landmine. I want no part of him. I hate to poo-poo your pick, man, but I have no freaking love for Jalin Hyatt at all. Like, push back at me, like, please. And I welcome it. Please body slam me here with some Hyatt knowledge. Like, make me believe in this dude, because I do not see it, man.
I think that, look, he's a one-season wonder. That's what we got to look at. I think that there is, I talked about earlier, there's a specific role that he's going to fill in the NFL, and you talked about him being asked to play outside. I don't see that. I think that his size, his profile, his speed, he's going to be a speed slot, and that narrows his landing spots down. But I think that teams are realistic that is a true role that they can utilize him in the NFL. I think that, you picked out some numbers that he didn't perform particularly well in, but, 80th percentile receiving yards per team pass attempts, that's better than Zay Flowers. That's better than Jordan Addison. That's better than Quentin Johnston. That's better than Cedric Tillman. That's better than Marvin Mims. Like that. That's a solid number. It's not a sexy pick. It's not an amazing pick, but I think there is definitely a world in which he is drafted to a situation where a team is going to use him. And I think that any team that drafts him has got a plan, because anybody that's spending early day 2 draft capital on a wide receiver isn't just drafting him just for the fun of it. They're looking at him and saying, this is a weapon that we can get the best out of. And I think that any offense that adds him in there is going to have that plan and utilize him for, yes, he has 2 elite skills. He is a great straight line speed runner, and he has got, for me, the best ball tracking skills of anyone in this draft. And I think that's a skill that translates to the NFL. And I think that as a speed slot, he can be utilized and will have a role.
I think Jalin Hyatt just looks like the ugly cousin to Denzel Mims to me.
Well, we're going to, on that note, move on from Jalin Hyatt. As much as I wanted to kind of let that conversation go and go. Max, 207, what have you got for us here?
I mean, do we go with Denzel Mims' handsome cousin Marvin Mims?
You know what? That is what's called a professional transition. That was very well done.
I feel like I've got a bit of pressure to do that now. He is someone I'm considering, along with, Roschon Johnson's there. I do quite like him. I think if he wasn't, buried behind Bijan Robinson, he would be much higher up in this draft. But then there's also like the caveat of, Roschon Johnson's running, but at a team that's just been, battered by Bijan Robinson. Like, he's got a bit of an easier task than perhaps other people. But I do like the prospect. Tank Bigsby's another guy there that I am looking at. So this is actually where I think we start to come back into a little bit of value, sort of after the midway point in the second round. A couple of these guys I'm quite happy to spend this kind of pick on. And maybe that's worth a tip if you're at the back end of the first. Just maybe try trading back, and you're going to get a bit more value in the sort of the mid-second rounds. Kind of a coin flip here. I'm going to have to go Marvin Mims now after that comment. You can't not go Marvin Mims. A guy that, electrically fast. I don't know if he was the fastest wide receiver at the combine, but he was certainly very, very close. Yeah, his game, again, it's going to depend. I don't think I've ever said this about any draft class more, but it depends where he lands, right? I feel like I'm saying that about almost every single player past the top 8. So Marvin Mims, I do quite like him. I think he's got a lot of skills, and they can translate to the NFL.
Derek, we've had a run of 3 wide receivers in a row there. Are you going to follow with a wide receiver, or some of these running backs starting to appeal now?
I would have loved to have taken Tyjae Spears, but that sharp pick is off the board. I'm going to go with my dude, and I get that all the industrial mock complex is saying that he is going to go in the 5th round, the 6th round. I think that is total bullshit. We do not know draft capital right now. So I'm throwing it all to the damn wind. I do not care. Give me my RB4 here. I'm going Evan Hull.
Dive into the player search for that one.
I'm going to sit here and say that, and I'll give the spiel because I'm sure I'm going to get some pushback from the boys here.
None from me. I love the pick. I love the guy.
Evan Hull. Everybody has said he is a 5th or 6th round pick. I do not believe that. I don't get that. He has also had 30 visits with the Vikings and the Packers. I think that he could go maybe. I think round 3 is very generous. I think that he could sneak in round 4 though. And if a team loves him, I would not be shocked if he went in round 3 of the NFL draft. I know that that is pushing back against everything that is being mocked right now. I'm just going to sit here and say, I think that the entire onus around Evan Hull has been bullshit, is bullshit. Like, I think, like, basically he has proved the concept of everything about his profile. They said he was going to be slow. He ran at the M44. They said he wasn't going to be athletic. If you compare his testing right up next to Bijan Robinson's, they're the damn same. And I sure as hell don't hear anybody talk about Bijan Robinson not being athletic. You can put them right side by side, and I dare you, without showing the names, to tell me who is Evan Hull and who is Bijan Robinson. So you want to add that into the fact that he was 7th in yards per out run and he led the whole damn nation in receiving yards amongst running backs last year? Yeah, I think he's a 3-down workhorse. He goes in round 4. You bet your ass I'm taking Evan Hull right here. Lovely
stuff. Rich, 209, who you got for us?
No, I just quickly want to add on Evan Hull. I really like the pick. He's 73rd percentile prospect in my pre-draft model. That's better than Jamhyr Gibbs.
I mean, your model's amazing.
Charbonnet.
That's all I got to say.
That's better than Tyjae Spears. Like, if he gets the draft capital, I'm all in. The guy I'm going here, though, shock, it's the guy that I've been in love with for the past 3 years. I feel like he's breaking my heart, but I can't let it go. Kayshon Boutte, let's just get him good draft capital. Let's hope that he can have his head on straight. If you're talking potential, this guy has top 3 in this draft potential. Like, his ceiling is higher than any wide receiver by a long way, but I'm not quite sure that what is between his ears is going to allow him to reach that potential. Exactly. But at this point in late second round pick, I've got to shoot for the moon, and yeah, let's just hope that he can keep it straight. He can be a superstar, because if he is at this value, it's amazing.
What if I were to tell you that I thought that, how heavily, and I'm going to ask this, but I'm kind of leading with this question. How heavily does your model weigh breakout age?
It doesn't weigh pure breakout age.
Is it weighing market share? Like what's the?
So it's yards per team pass attempts breakout age, and a PPR percentile breakout age.
Okay. What if I were to tell you that Kayshon Boutte's 735 receiving yards in the 2020 season and that breakout age is fraudulent? What if I were to tell you that it's absolutely fraudulent and it's the hope candle that needs to be extinguished?
Well, this is where my model doesn't use pure breakout age, because according to my model, he didn't break out in terms of yards per team pass attempt or PPR percentile, because it takes into account that, basically. So that's why I don't use pure breakout age to how I measure it.
Yeah, I only bring it up because I know, depending on how people's models weigh certain analytics and stuff, because I've been pushing back against the general consensus, because a lot of people point to his early breakout age and what he did in the 2020 season, which honestly was really, really fraudulent. If you look at, and I go back to this because I looked at this when I wrote Terrace Marshall up as a prospect. Over the first 7 games of the LSU season that year, you had Kayshon Boutte had a 12% target share versus Terrace Marshall's 25% target share. It wasn't until Terrace Marshall missed the final 4 games of that season that Boutte racked up 527 of his 735 receiving yards in 4 games. Outside of that, and that's without a Terrace Marshall. If Terrace Marshall would have not been, if he'd have been healthy, I mean, he was squashing Boutte for the entire freaking season. If he doesn't go out injured, Boutte walks away with, probably, considering what he did for their first 7 games, a quiet season, and a lot of people are not holding on to hope of what he did as an early career collegiate prospect.
So it's the Ole Miss game, isn't it? 11 receptions, 330 yards, 3 touchdowns. It's going to skew any stats you look at.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're going to rapid fire these last few picks here. Mags, 210 here. What have you got for me? And then just a brief bit on it quickly.
I'm going to go with one of the guys I spoke about earlier. It's a coin flip. Let's go Roschon Johnson. I'd give him some love.
Good stuff. Derek, your last player. I know you wrote a good article on FantasyPros this week about big-bodied wide receivers and sort of like their potential in these late rounds. Anyone that stands out quickly for you?
I'm in between two guys. I'm gonna go with the guy that I know gets the draft capital. I would, if I knew that he was going in round 3, round 4, I would easily go Puka Nacua here, but I'm not. I brought him up earlier. This is one of the guys you're shooting the ceiling on. Samuel Laporta. He led all freaking tight ends. Here we go, baby. He's led all freaking tight ends and missed tackles forced. He pops in damn near everything you look at for tight ends: yards per route run, PFF receiving grades. He lined up 20% of his snaps on the outside last year. He is going to be a weapon and get top 50 draft capital. I love Sam Laporta.
Good stuff, Rich. Obviously, you sounded like you wanted Laporta there.
I'm
Who you going for
fuming.
instead?
I'm fuming. That's my Titan 3. I'm in love with the guy. I think I can take him
baby.
back end of round 2, early round 3 every draft. And yeah, I'm fuming right now.
Sam Laporta is why you want second round picks in Dynasty rookie drafts right now.
Yeah, right. Let's. This is the point at which I'm transitioning, basically just drafting running back. So give me Chase Brown.
Okay, good stuff. So Chase Brown's the last pick there. I'm going to round things out there. That's all the time we've got for you here. Make sure you're following Derek at Debro_FFB for his work with FantasyPros. This time of year, the articles were coming out so quickly and he's putting out so much good content. Follow Mags at Hotseat Mags on Twitter. Check out his great YouTube channel, The Hotseat, just linked below. Of course, you know where to find me and Rich. We've both got written work coming out. Mine for FantasyPros and Underdog. Rich over at DLF. Hit the like and subscribe button. Tell us how much you love or hate Jalin Hyatt. Loads more content coming soon.